Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now, here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhodge with Authentic Living with Roxanne. Today I have a colleague, Julianna Bootsman. Julianna and I actually belong to a same speakers bureau, and we met probably about a month ago and realized we had this luscious conversation about conscious leadership, which is the speakers bureau that we belong to. So I guess the question becomes, what is conscious leadership? And I guess from my definition, it's about where you are aware about the presence that you're bringing into a situation as you lead, from the micro level, from the space that you are leading and what's your frontward facing customer gets, all the way up to your senior leadership team or your CEO level. So Julianna has started a business about over 10 years ago now, and it's called White Box Leadership. I'm going to talk a little bit about that title because I just listened to an amazing video where she explains it. And Julianna she's a chief spiritual officer. I love that title. So Julianna, thanks so much for being here today to share your wisdom with my audience.
Thank you so much for having me, Roxanne.
So let's talk a little bit about Julianna. I always love the backstory about why, today, you're doing this amazing work in corporate culture. What got you wanting to get involved in conscious leadership?
Yeah. Well, I love how you started the conversation here right off the top this morning, or whatever time anyone's listening to it, but it's morning for us. But we think about conscious leadership and what the word is. And if you think about being conscious, where that often takes us is the idea of being awake. And there can be a lot of talk about woke people. And so I'm not really going there, but it's the idea of being awake. And when we're awake, we're more aware. When we're more aware of all that is going on in the situations that we're in the very present moment that we're in, we're able to respond in a way that comes from a higher level of wisdom, a higher level of deeper level of connection, and then ultimately create change, transformation, and just offer whatever is going to be of the highest good in that moment. And so that's really, where this comes from for me. And so my inspiration, or my sort of calling to come into this work, came from my own journey of becoming more conscious and awake to what's really going on in my own life. I like to say I have had 4 successful careers, but only one vocation, and that vocation is to love. And when I went through and followed the thread of my life, from starting out as my first passion, my first thing, there was no plan B, it was only a plan A, and that was to be a professional dancer. And so I pursued that, and I went with that. I went and I moved to New York, and at that point started to meet all the fears, all the doubts, all that. I'm not, where do I measure up against the rest? Lots of other backstory there. I've got a chapter coming out in a book specifically with that story more there. But, from there though, I went into, okay, what am I going to do now? If I'm not going to be a dancer, where do I go now? And I ended up finding myself in PR and marketing. And, or actually before that, I went into dance and teaching dance. So that was where really for me, where the coaching began, working with these young dancers, really able to see them beyond what it is that they do as their craft, as their talent, which it would be dance, but into who they are at a soul level. And when I could work with them and see them and connect with them on that level, they were able to improve and perform and show up at such a higher level without them actually having to train or practice anymore. It's like something activated in them. And one of my first experiences I call like my first sort of God moment was in that space of dance where I was at a convention, and it was there was a lot of dancers at this convention in LA, and people that I had, I would look at and say they're way better than me. And so I kind of felt like I'm here, but I'm not really the best. And but I loved dance. Like it is an expression of my soul and my spirit. And so this one incredible choreographer was teaching us this routine, and it was my groups, like, 50 of us at a time were performing or getting to kind of do the routine. And I just had we started with our backs to the stage, in this giant ballroom in a hotel. And I just put my arms by my side and I just said, let it all go. Just let yourself go completely. And I let myself go completely into the music, into the routine, into all of it. And I moved and danced like I had never before. I had tears running down my face. My ballet teacher's on the side. She has tears running down her face. And the routine finished, says, Julianna, I've never seen you move like that. So I've never felt myself move like that before. And so I didn't have to train harder. I didn't have to do anything more. All I needed to do in that moment was actually let go and connect into a true part of myself. And so there was a letting go, but a coming awake that allowed me to perform at a level that I couldn't reach otherwise. And so I took and I worked with my dancers that I worked with my students in that way. And then I went into PR and marketing, and in there, the core of that work, which became like this common thread, was to support people to live at the true expression of who they really are. So that's what happened to me in that moment at this dance convention. It's what I did with my students in dance. When I worked with organizations in PR, marketing, and communications, it was about getting to the core of who are you really, and how do I guide you to live in, how do I support you to live more authentically into that expression? But what happened in the PR and marketing communications, like I would do branding work and all of that. I loved it, was really great at it. But the organizations, that in a company, making sure that you've got your marketing materials, making sure that you've got your branding right, making sure you've got the right tagline. We would create all of that, and it would be authentic to who they really are based on what we were learning about them. But it was almost like we would jump ahead. And so it's like we gave them a fancy new coat and a new car and a new house, but the inner work wasn't being done within the organization for them to actually know what it feels like to truly live that expression and not just look like it. And that's where it started to become out of alignment for me with just doing the PR and marketing. And I thought, and by that point, I already knew I am a coach. And my gift is to be able to see people at the level of their soul and spirit and draw that out and work with them from the inside out, not from the outside in. So I had to honor that truth in myself. And that's where I shifted my company into primarily the conscious leadership work. And by that, really supporting people to always, leave better than they came, but really live into that true expression, true essence of who they are. And I believe when we do that, we then show up with the full, authentic, true data of what's true for us. And we're able to then gather that from the world around us. And then we can create what is highest and best and good for then the extending community outside of our organizations, outside of who we are as individual leaders. So that's a bit of the,
well, and that's I love what you said. It's letting go and being awake, right? Yes. So try to explain that a little bit more, because I know what that is, because of course when I coach and and work with people, I understand that. But for the average person that may be listening that doesn't have that sense of what that is, try to, if we could break it down in some way, because it's I would say it's a somatic experience.
Yeah.
It's and it's an alignment with that truest sense of who you were meant to be.
Yes.
Not who you think you should be or what you're needing to project out to be, but just that sense that I often say, it's like I'm in that space of perfectness that I came into the world as, and then I touched that.
Yeah. I think one of the feelings or the experiences that we strive to be able to operate in is that of flow. And so, and I think freedom is a top value for many. And so, especially people who are entrepreneurs or leaders, often why you get into it is because what you desire is a sense of freedom. You want to be able to sort of be in control, but also have freedom. So it's this paradox of creating an environment and creating a place where we are free and being able to have a sense of control within those moments. And so when we talk about being in flow, one of the analogies or whatever that comes up for me is I had a friend of mine who's a leader that I work with tell me about a story where she was whitewater rafting and had fallen out of the boat and was in the rapid. And she was in the rapid, but she was trying to like grip and control and what was happening when she was doing that was it was actually causing her to be pulled under. And so what she had to do to be in the flow of everything that was happening in this moment was actually let go. Let go, be in a total place of like rest, and let what was happening around her move with her. And by doing that, she could then float more. She could be able to really quickly see and respond to what she needed to rather than trying to grasp for things. And as we move through our world, there is a lot of moving parts happening around us all the time. Within ourselves, within our families, within our businesses, within just the nature and the world around us that is not in our control. And our highest ability to be able to respond rather than react to things is to come from this state of rest and letting go. So it's like,
which is a state that I think a lot of people are chasing, though, Julianna, because if you think of we were just chatting before we got online about the concept of love versus fear. So let's talk a little bit about that, because ultimately we know how little control we really have over things, and it's about getting to a pace of acceptance that we can only do what we can do, and then we have to let go in order to experience things, right? So I think of when I'll give you an example. When I learned to dive, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, grew up in the Caribbean Sea, beautiful, love the water. But my thing was, when you learn to dive, guess what? You lose sensation, right? So I had to take off, my mask. Right. When for most of us, if you think about what we take in internally, that visual is the protective lens that most human beings have. Well, I thought, I love the water. There's no way I took off my mask, and I was in a 10-foot pool. I kept flying up because I was so petrified. And I'll never forget what my instructor said to me. He said, "It'll be okay so long as your regulator, which is the thing that you use to breathe, stays in your mouth." And I thought, now I'm still freaking out because I can't see a thing, but I listened to his words, which was just breathe.
Yeah.
And then I finally, got over the fear because I had lost that sensation. And then I was able to follow instruction, because if not, I was completely in fear mode.
Yeah.
And so I was panicking, and that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
But I know you and I, bringing it back to what we were talking about, you and I were just talking a little bit about love in business. And I want to talk a little bit between the polarities between fear and love. And as human beings, the space that we go into as human beings and how we interface with the world, and how you, as a chief spiritual officer, how do you kind of use that word of love, which oftentimes in corporate environments, it's kind of like, that's a little bit woo-woo. So tell me a little bit about that concept of love.
Well, I see love as one of the most powerful resources that we have accessible to us, and it's accessible to everybody. And it's often, I think, one of the most underutilized or misunderstood of how to actually use it and what do we mean. So we're talking about like companionate love. We're talking about like compassion and empathy and care. And if we think about, the places that we do truly love something, there's an expansiveness to it. There's a desire for something to thrive. There's a natural instinct to give rather than to take. And so by that, it's this outpouring. And so when we feel ourselves in a state of love, about anything it is, it's expansive. What happens. And so sometimes I like to go into science, and like when we think of just like biologically what begins to happen within the cells of our body. So we can take it outside of, as a chief spiritual officer, sometimes that can take people into the place of religion or whatever. But what we're really talking about here is an alive spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at like sports teams, or I think about like my children's schools, or I think about even a city, and we have like spirit days, and we talk about like, we want the spirit of someplace to be like high and good. That's what we're talking about. And when our spirit is alive and high, our ability to engage from a very expansive and open place, where if we think about even like the cells in our body, they're now not constricted. And then you brought it back to your breath. And so that's, like just, you're okay, you're going to breathe. And so when we are connected into a place where our spirit is alive, our breath actually becomes more fluid, less constricted. And our breath is our life force. And so really, one of the teachings that I use in the work that I do in all of the corporate leadership and conscious leadership I integrate and support us to be paying attention, awake to our breath. Because we want our system, our physical body, to be functioning as freely, with as much ease as possible. We want it to be well and healthy. And in order to do that, we need to be able to be in a place that is light.
Right. And like with heart rate variability too, right? The study with the Heart Math Institute, they show about resonance, right? So like how when you put people in attunement that are in a meditative state, obviously we lower it and we drop down into that essence, versus if you look at people that are in stress states, how they're kind of out of resonance with their heartbeat. And then when you put people that are kind of, if you and I were to say even meditate online, because we're not physically together, we can align heart to heart, which impacts our hearts to be able to be more rhythmic together. So it's fascinating what you're saying. It's so true. But again, from a corporate perspective, oftentimes you'll hear people say it's tactical, it's bottom line. We have to report to the board. We have our key performance indicators. We're off track, and people go into fear, which becomes more KPI driven, which is we're off track, versus going into the space that you're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about when you work with leaders or different environments. How is it that you decide if they're ready to do some of this work? Let's say you get a call like I do, and people are saying they want certain things. How do you kind of assess whether the readiness for someone to kind of enter into this work with you, Julianna?
Mm-hmm. It comes from the leadership. If the leadership has a connection and a draw to wanting to caring for the well-being of the people in the organization. And so when I think about love in leadership, and what is love, it's the long-term care and concern for the well-being of others. Mm-hmm. So it's not just for this moment or this project. With the people in your organization, you're looking for long-term sustainability here. You're looking for legacy. You're wanting to see and have an organization that is well and in all ways, purpose, profit, performance, people, all of it. And so if that matters to you, then we have to look at the whole person. Mm-hmm. And I often say the work of a chief spiritual officer is about keeping the lights on. And that's the light of the people within your organization.
The spiritual light, tapping into
the light
that
within your people is dim or constricted or flickering, your organization, are eventually going to be affected. And sometimes you can jimmy up all sorts of hot cords, and you can find all sorts of ways to like keep those lights on, and and at some point it's going to just short circuit.
So tell me about a scenario that maybe you've come across and of some of the things that has not gone well with some organizations, that they want this, but maybe they're maybe they're a bit too hasty and they try to implement some of these things and they fall flat. Do you have any scenarios or situations that maybe you've come across in your time working with some organizations to share?
Yeah, I think sometimes what happens in situations where it doesn't, where it's like we want it, we kind of it's that it's like I want to run that marathon, but I want it now. Like I want to just get up and go and do it. It's the long-term commitment and connection to being able to continue to nurture it and to connect into it. And so it's where they're looking at it from a place where it's just like, let's bring in the speaker or the person or the thing. And like, we're just going to do this one program. And then all of a sudden everything's going to like, this is going to work. They're not looking at it from a perspective of how do we build this into the operations of our company?
Right. So they're looking at almost like a putting a Band-Aid on potentially what the issue is, instead of backing up and saying, well, we're having maybe more conflict, or maybe we're missing deadlines. Let's just do a time management thing or a whatever.
Yeah.
Just kind of backing up and saying, why is it not working well? What's happening? Who are your new people who have left? There's hybrid, there's remote, there's in person. There's so many moving parts, to your point.
Yes.
And if you just kind of create a solution, it might address it, in the interim for a short period of time. And then of course it's going to, often say it bubbles up, but it might show itself in a different packaging.
Yeah. Yes. And so that is why the work that I do is really working with organizations to building this into the operations of your organization. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what has often sort of been historical in when we're doing the inner work of the organization, or call it professional development or whatever that is it's like one-off courses that people will go to, and they'll help and they'll do something good and you can get a lot of good from it. But for long-term integration and change that really sticks, we know through so many examples, whether it's you're trying to make a lifestyle change within your exercise or your diet or whatever, it's being able to connect into what is actually true for us as an organization, who we are, and how do we continue to know that we're looking for, this is an ongoing thing. And so I work with companies to be able to go and assess and sort of audit them from, like I call it like an energy audit almost. It's like a life force audit. Where is the life force of your organization right now? And what's it operating at? And what's going to work best for the rhythm of your organization, for the rhythm and of who your people really are. And then we create and we adapt it for that, because you want this to be able to be just now a part of how your company breathes. We bring it back.
So do you do it at every level when you do the assessment? Are you starting with senior leadership, kind of middle management, frontline, and kind of the interface with the frontward facing customer? Are you doing it at that every level? Because like, to your point, you have to start at the most senior level, because you can address the middle management, implications. But if you don't have the flow from what's coming from the very top to the, kind of the main engine, which is your middle managers, that's it's good. They're going to buck against each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So ideally that's what we do, is we then get to take a cross section depending on the size of the organization and really kind of look at what's really happening here. Where is everybody really at? And so we open up and do like a full conversation with as many people from the organization from different parts that are willing to have the conversation with us. And from there, we get to really hear what, Brene Brown says, connection is to be seen, heard, and valued. So that's the first step that we do, is we make sure that we see, hear, and that the people within the organization are valued. And then based on what we actually hear from them, we respond with we've heard what you've shared, and here's how we're responding. And this is what we're integrating into this program. That is customized for the organization. It becomes their conscious leadership program. And the results of what we've seen in the program that we've put through, there's one company that I have as a global organization. So we're working with people from all over the world. So I've got people in my program from Spain and Italy and across the States and different parts of Canada, in Ireland, and just all over the world. And what I find so incredible is that there actually isn't that much difference between what we're all dealing with. It comes down to the same things of like feeling of burnout, feeling of am I worthy, feeling of the desire to want to be able to always do more, of perfectionism, just all of these things of, simple things of just like physically, I'm not taking care of myself well enough. Spiritually, I'm not attending to myself. It's so much of the same things that show up. But what ends up happening is through the program that we created for this organization and that we create for the organizations, that's rooted in all of the elements of consciousness and compassion, empathy, love, and how to just be able to a high level of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, is the environment that they're working in hasn't changed, but their ability to respond to the environment has changed. And as a result, they feel less stressed. They feel more capable. They genuinely feel happier. The connections amongst the people in the organization, even though so many of them are working virtually in different parts, has gotten better because they're connecting with people through even the programming. They have common language to use. They feel seen and heard in an organization, that they don't feel alone in the fact that, oh, we actually want to operate from a place of love too. And these are the things that matter to us. And I can't believe I work in an organization that also cares about these things. It's sort of like this unspoken goodness that nobody's bringing to the surface because we're all just getting the work done.
This was such a great interview that we decided to turn it into a 2-part series. Be sure to tune in next week for part 2, so you don't miss out on the amazing content.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannederhaj.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.